Hi everyone. It is actually Friday, June 27th. It is like maybe 3 days since John and I filmed chapter 8. And I just wanted to say before the video comes on that I just wanted to give everyone a thoughtful heads up because chapter 8 contains some randiness. um, it's emotionally intense, and it has some sexual it has sexual content to it, and John and I read through this video together. So the one time we were talking about me maybe reading Ellen, because it seemed, well, I said to him, I should read the women's parts with you. And after I did this reading, I think that because there was so much dialogue, it was almost like a play. And I liked the way that it flowed, but I can actually see where John is more performative than I am. And but we read this scene together, and he read Brody and he read Hooper. I read Ellen, and we did offer, I don't know if we stopped midway on this one to offer our reflections on this. We did stop halfway, and then we got back to it, and then we have a commentary after also. But I'm not trying to sensationalize this in any way, but just to explore the deeper meaning and emotional, I don't know, undercurrents of it. There was a lot left out of the movie. And that's another thing I want to say. A lot of times I love to read a book before I see the movie because I want to see how bad Hollywood is going to butcher it. There is so much content that was left out of this book. And what I'm coming to find out from my own perspective is that, yes, there's a shark in the water, but there are sharks everywhere. There's political sharks, and we would have another name for Ellen today, but I feel like she's a type of shark so far. John and I didn't film, well, we went through chapter 9 just to see, like, what am I going to pick up where I left off with Ellen in this chapter? Is there are we still going with Ellen being front and center here? It's almost like I forgot about the fact that there's a shark in the water. So there's another shark coming in an absolutely new character. Before right after this chapter, there's a new character that comes in that is a totally other shark. So really the message here is that if you are sensitive to this type of content, or you just prefer to skip it, I completely understand. I want to keep this as a safe and respectful space. I even have sometimes a hard time with the writing and the language, and just the way things were socially in the 70s. They're certainly not like that now, and I sometimes think, like, should I pause and like take that out? There's some content that I am uncomfortable with, and I'm like, oh, we don't talk like that like now, we should take that out. But I do think that it's relevant, and it's relevant for a number of reasons. It's not relevant for the way things were at a certain time in our history, and it's relevant to how far we can't erase the past, because then we don't have anything to measure it up against. That's the way that I look at things. When people are running around and saying you can't read this book and you have to burn this and you have to, why? We need to know, we need to have something that shows us where we were, where we are, because if we erase it, it's just going to repeat itself, because there's nothing to learn. So that even though I'm uncomfortable, I learned from it, and I learned the way that maybe the social vernacular was at the time, the way people spoke. It makes our blood, boil or curl or like shriek away from home. But yes, it is important to know that we've come a long way. That's what I want to say. So, but as always, I just want this to be give you room and have this room that you enter into in this channel, in this space, that you make a choice that's right for you. And with that said, let's get on with the show. I'm going to be doing some diamond painting for my next video. So thank you for this little 5-minute personal note, and enjoy. Bye. We never can part ways where I don't have one more thing. The most important part is I am going to be uploading this right now, and I don't know if YouTube is going to flag me for, like I said, words or content. And if they do, then this will just go out into the members, and then this 5-minute, 6-minute video now that I'm doing will just go out, you know, to the public. If you don't see chapter 8 publicly, it means that it just went to my members, and it will go under a private listing, and they will get a link so that they can see it. But if, you know, I won't put it out publicly. Okay, so if you don't see chapter 6, that's why. If you want to, yeah. Is it important to this book? Yes. So I don't know how to get around it. I would say go and look it up and see if you could find any information on this chapter from the original book, or maybe when we have our movie night, which will be open to the members and subscribers, we can discuss it then. There's only 14 chapters, and John and I are already on 9 and probably going to do 10. So, okay, goodbye again. Bye. Good evening and welcome to Elisa Maria Designs. I am Elisa Maria. Welcome back if you are back, and welcome if you are new. Today is Wednesday, June 25th, and the heat index is about 105. John and I stayed in most of the day. We had a few errands to run, and we decided that we wanted to jump right into chapter 8, which is going to start off where we left off. Brody went to sleep. He had his dreamless sleep, and it's the next morning he's waking up. And this chapter is pretty heavy with Ellen, so I'm going to join John, at least I'm going to try to join John in the reading. John and I, when we were out on our errand, and I was actually editing in the car, and I said to him, you know, there were a few things that, you know, the beauty of editing that you can really catch, that you didn't catch in the original reading. And one of them was Ellen saying to her husband when she wanted to have this dinner party for Matt Hooper, well, didn't I tell you that I ran into him in the hardware store? He's actually one of the Hoopers that I used to know. So she never explains, she dropped the context that Matt was David's baby brother, and that he's the brother of someone that she used to date. So for that, and the discussion that we had, it just added to her deception, as far as, you know, my opinion. And I think she had motives from the time that she met this guy. And then there was something else at the dinner party. It was Dixie or Daisy? Daisy, right? Daisy, who is the curator of an antique store.
I don't think she's a curator. She works there. She's on commission. And
she gives you an idea of what her opinion is of running an antique store. That these things are for people that, how did she put it?
That are not comfortable with the present and want to look back at their past.
He's a genius, Benchley. He's a genius. So we're going to be in chapter 8. Do you want to say anything about the 2 things that I brought out from the last chapter?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the only thing I wanted to say regarding the 2 things that Elisa brought up from the last commentary is that, yes, I agree with her that it's important the way Ellen, you know, basically says to Brody, oh, I'm sure I told you, which I'm guessing she probably didn't. So if she didn't tell him, it's
Yeah, because he
kind
brushed
of
it off. He said it
kind of
doesn't
sort
matter.
of kind of sort of
Doesn't
gaslighting.
matter. He just figures it's one of her other summer people.
Kind of sort of gaslighting, and then but the other thing is, of course, that by saying, you know, oh, he's one of the Hoopers that I used to know, the inference there is that this is just a family I used to know when, you know, I was rich, affluent, living in New York with my family before we married, and you know, again, I think it's there's a lot in the undercurrent or the subtext of that statement.
Sure.
That
Sure.
you know, again, she's Elise has said deceptive. I like the word duplicitous because she's clearly trying to mislead her husband.
But we
because
both
she
use
doesn't
the word gaslighting.
she doesn't want you know her husband to know that this particular fella was, you know, 9 years old when she was dating his 20-year-old brother. Because again, has she been honest about that, I'm fairly confident Martin Brody would have said, whoa, what do you now? What do you know, no. And it would have put his radar up, and he probably would have been a little more, a little bit more standoffish around Hooper, because he has to be in Hooper's company. Hooper's trying to catch the fish. Anyway.
So we're going to start the reading, and I think what to do is when you're done reading, like you're going to read.
No, I'm going to just, I'll stop when it's your turn to read.
That's what I was going to say. And then I'll stop when it's your turn to read.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
Brody awoke with a start, jolted by a signal that told him something was wrong. He threw his arm across the bed to touch Ellen, but she wasn't there. He sat and saw her sitting in the chair by the window. Rain splashed against the window panes, and he heard the wind whipping through the trees. "Lousy day, huh?" he said. She didn't answer, continuing to stare fixedly at the drops sliding down the glass. "How come you're up so early?"
I couldn't sleep.
"Oh, I sure didn't have any trouble."
I'm not surprised.
"Oh boy, are we starting in again?"
Ellen shook her head. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything. She seemed subdued, sad.
"What's the matter?"
Nothing.
"Whatever you say." Brody got out of bed and he went into the bathroom. Once he had shaved and dressed, he went down to the kitchen. The boys were finishing their breakfast, and Ellen was frying an egg for him. "What are you guys going to do on this crummy day?" he asked. Clean lawnmowers," said Billy, who worked during the summer for a local gardener. "Boy, do I hate rainy days." "And what about you two, Brody?" said to Martin and Sean.
Martin's going to the boys' club, and Sean's spending the day at the Santos.
"And you?"
I've got a full day at the hospital, which reminds me, I won't be home for lunch. Can you get something from downtown?
"Sure. I didn't know you worked a full day on Wednesdays."
I don't, usually, but one of the other girls is sick, so I said I would fill in.
"Oh,
I'll be back by supper time.
fine."
Do you think you could drop off Sean and Martin on your way to work? I want to do a little shopping on my way to the hospital.
"Yeah, no problem."
I'll pick them up on my way home.
Brody and the two younger children left first, then Billy, wrapped from head to foot in foul weather gear, bicycled off to work. Ellen looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. It was a few minutes to 8. Too early? Maybe. But better to catch him now, before he went off somewhere and the chance was lost. She held her right hand out in front of her and tried to steady the fingers, but they quivered uncontrollably. She smiled at her nervousness and whispered to herself,
Some swinger you'd make. She went upstairs to the bedroom, sat on the bed, and picked up the green phone book. She found the number for the Abelard Arms Inn, put her hand on the phone, hesitated for a moment, then picked up the receiver and dialed the number.
Hey, Ballard Arms.
Mr. Hooper's room, please. Matt Hooper?
Just a minute, please. Hooper, here it is. 405. I'll ring it for you.
Ellen heard the phone ring once, then again. She could hear her heart beating, and she saw the pulse throb in her right wrist. Hang up, she told herself. Hang up. There's time.
Hello, said Hooper's voice.
Oh, she thought, good God, suppose he's with Daisy Wicker in the room with him.
Hello?
Ellen swallowed and said, hi, it's me. I mean, it's Ellen.
Oh, hi.
I hope I didn't wake you.
No, I was just getting ready to go downstairs and have some breakfast.
Good. It's not a very nice day, is it?
No, but I don't really mind. It's a luxury for me to be able to sleep this late.
Will you be able to work today?
I don't know. I'm just trying to figure that out. I sure can't go out in the boat and hope to get anything done.
Oh. She paused, fighting the dizziness that was creeping up on her. Go ahead, she told herself. Ask the question. I was wondering. No, be careful. Ease into it. I wanted to thank you for the beautiful charm.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you liked it. But I should be thanking you. I had a really nice time last night.
I did. We did. I'm glad you came.
Yes.
It was like old times.
Yes.
Now, she said to herself, do it. The words spilled from her mouth. I was wondering, if you can't do any work today, if you can't go out in the boat or anything, I was wondering if there was any chance you'd like to, if you're free for lunch.
Lunch?
Yes, if you have nothing else to do. I thought we might have some lunch.
We? You mean you and the chief and me?
No, just you and I. Martin usually has lunch at his desk. I don't want to interfere with your plans or anything. If you've got a lot of work to do.
No, that's okay. Heck, why not? Sure, what did you have in mind?
There's a wonderful place up in Sag Harbor. Banners. Do you know it? She hoped he didn't. She didn't know it either, which meant that no one there would know her. But she had heard that it was a good and quiet and dark.
No, I've never been there, but Sag Harbor, it's quite a hike for lunch.
It's not that bad, really. Only about 15 or 20 minutes. I can meet you there whenever you like.
Well, anytime's all right with me.
Around 12:30 then?
12:30 it is. I'll see you then.
Ellen hung up the phone. Her hands were still shaking, but she felt elated, excited. Her senses seemed alive and incredibly keen. Every time she drew a breath, she savored the smell around her. Her ears jingled with a symphony of tiny house sounds, creaks and rustles and thumps. She felt more intensely feminine than she had in years, a warm, wet feeling, both delicious and uncomfortable. She went into the bathroom and took a shower. She shaved her legs and under her arms. She wished she had bought one of those feminine hygiene deodorants she had seen advertised, but lacking that, she powdered herself and daubed cologne behind her ears, inside her elbows, behind her knees, on her nipples, and on her genitals. There was a full-length mirror in the bedroom, and she stood there, examining herself. Were the goods good enough? Would the offering be accepted? She had work to keep in shape, to persevere the smoothness and sinuousness of youth. She could not bear the thought of rejection. The goods were good. The lines in her neck were few and barely noticeable. Her face was unblemished and unscarred. There was no droops or sags or pouches. She stood straight and admired the contours of her breasts. Her waist was slim, her belly flat, the reward for endless hours of exercise after each child. The only problem, as she assessed her body critically, was her hips. By no stretch of anyone's imagination were they girlish. They signaled motherhood. They were, as Brody once said, breeder's hips. The recollection brought a quick flash of remorse, but excitement quickly nudged it aside. Her legs were long, and below the pad of fat on her rear, slender. Her ankles were delicate, and her feet, with the toenails neatly pruned, were perfect enough for any to suit any pedophile. She dressed in her hospital clothes. From the back of her closet, she took a plastic shopping bag into which she put a pair of bikini underpants, a bra, a neatly folded lavender summer dress, a pair of low-heeled pumps, and a can of spray deodorant, a plastic bottle of bath powder, a toothbrush, and a tube of toothpaste. She carried the bag to the garage, tossed it in the back seat of her Volkswagen Beetle, backed out of the driveway, and drove to the Southampton hospital. The dull drive increased the fatigue she had been feeling for hours. She had not slept all night. She had first lain in bed, then sat by the window, struggling with all the twistings of emotion and conscience, desire and regret, longing and recrimination. She didn't know exactly when she had decided on this manifestly rash, dangerous plan. She had been thinking about it and trying not to think about it since the day she first met Hooper. She had weighed the risks and somehow calculated that they were worth taking, though she was not entirely sure what she would gain from the adventure. She knew she wanted change, almost any change. She wanted to be assured and reassured that she was desirable, not just to her husband, for she had grown complacent about that, but to the people she saw as her real peers, the people among whom she still numbered herself. She felt that without some remedy, the part of herself that she most cherished would die. Perhaps the past could never be revived, but perhaps it could be recalled physically as well as mentally. She wanted an injection, a transfusion of the essence of her past, and she saw Matt Hooper as the only possible donor. The thought of love never entered her mind, nor did she want or anticipate a relationship either profound or enduring. She sought only to be serviced, restored. She was grateful that the work assigned to her when she arrived at the hospital demanded concentration and conversation, for it prevented her from thinking. She and another volunteer changed the bedding of the elderly patients from whom the hospital community was a surrogate and, in some cases, final home. She had to remember the names of children in distant cities, had to fashion new excuses for why they had not written. She had to feign recollection of the plots of television shows and speculate on why such and such character had left his wife for a woman who was patiently and adventurous. At 11:45, Ellen told the supervisor of volunteers that she didn't feel well. Her thyroid was acting up again, she said, and she was getting her period. She thought she'd go lie down for a while in the staff lounge, and if a nap didn't help, she said she'd probably go home. In fact, if she wasn't back on the job by 1:30 or so, the supervisor could assume that she had gone home. It was an explanation that she hoped was vague enough to discourage anyone from actively looking for her. She went into the lounge, counted to 20, and opened the door crack to see if the corridor was empty. It was. Most of the staff were in or on their way to the cafeteria on the other side of the building. She stepped into the corridor, closed the door softly behind her, and hurried around the corner and out the side door of the hospital that led to the staff parking lot. She drove most of the way to Sag Harbor, then stopped at a gas station. When the tank was full and the gas was paid for, she asked to use the ladies' room. The attendant gave her the key, and she pulled her car around to the side of the station, next to the ladies' room door. She opened the door, but before going into the ladies' room, she returned the key to the attendant. She walked to her car, removed the plastic bag from the back seat, entered the ladies' room, and pushed the button that locked the door. She stripped, and standing on the cold floor in her bare feet, looking at her reflection in the mirror above the sink, she felt a thrill of risk. She sprayed deodorant under her arms and on her feet. She took the clean underpants from the plastic bag and stepped into them. She shook a little powder into each cup of the bra and put it on. She took the dress from the bag, unfolded it, checked it for wrinkles, and then slipped it over her head. She poured powder into each of her shoes, brushed off the bottom of each foot with a paper towel, and put on the shoes. Then she brushed her teeth, combed her hair, stuffed her hospital clothes into a plastic bag, and opened the door. She looked both ways, saw that no one was watching her, then stepped out of the ladies' room, tossed the bag into the car, and got in. And she drove out of the gas station. She hunched down in her seat so the attendant, if he should by chance notice her, would not see that she had changed her clothes. It was 12:20 when she arrived at Banner's, a small steak and seafood restaurant on the water in Sag Harbor. The parking lot was in the rear, for which she was grateful, and off the chance that someone she knew might drive down the street in Sag Harbor, she didn't want her car to be in plain view. One reason she had picked Banner's was that it was known as a favorite nighttime restaurant for the yachtsmen and summer people, which meant that it probably had a little lunch in trade, and it was expensive, which made it almost certain that no year-round residents, no local tradesmen, would go there for lunch. Ellen checked her wallet. She had nearly $50, all the emergency cash she and Brody kept in the house. She made a mental note of the bills: a 20, 2 10s, a 5, and 3 1s. She wanted to replace exactly what she had taken from the coffee can in the kitchen closet. There were 2 other cars in the parking lot, a Chevrolet Vega and a bigger car. She remembered that Hooper's car was green and that it was named after some animal. She left her car and walked into the restaurant, holding her hands over her head to protect her hair from the light rain. The restaurant was dark, but because the day was gloomy, it took her eyes only seconds to adjust. There was only one room, with a bar on the right as she walked in, and about 20 tables in the center. The left-hand wall was lined with 8 booths. The walls were dark wood, decorated with bullfight and movie posters. A couple in their late 20s, Ellen guessed, was having a drink at a table by a window. The bartender, a young man with a Van Dyke beard and a button-down shirt, sat by the cash register reading the New York Daily News. They were the only people in the room. Ellen looked at her watch. Almost 12:30.
Hi, can I help you?
Yes, in a minute. But first, I'd like, can you tell me where the ladies' room is?
End of the bar, turn right. It's the first door on your left.
Thank you. Ellen walked quickly down the length of the bar, turned right, and went to the ladies' room. She stood in front of the mirror and held out her right hand. It trembled, and she clenched it into a fist. Calm down, she said to herself. You have to calm down, or it's no use. It's lost. She felt that she was sweating, but when she put her hand inside her dress and felt her armpit, it was dry. She combed her hair and surveyed her teeth. She remembered something a boy she had once gone out with had said. Nothing turns my stomach faster than seeing a girl with a big piece of crud between her teeth. She looked at her watch. 12:35. She went back into the restaurant and looked around. Just the same couple, bartender, and a waitress standing at the bar, folding napkins. The waitress saw Ellen come around the corner of the bar and she asked, "Hello, may I help you?" "Yes, I'd like a table, please. For lunch? For one? No, for 2. "Fine," said the waitress. She put down a napkin, picked up a pad, and walked Ellen to a table in the middle of the room. "Is this all right?" "No, I mean, yes, it's fine, but I'd like to have that table in the corner booth, if you don't mind." "Sure," said the waitress. "Any table you like. We're not exactly full." She led Ellen to the table, and Ellen slipped into the booth with her back to the door. Hooper would be able to find her if he came. "Can I get you a drink?" "Yes, a gin and tonic, please." When the waitress left the table, Ellen smiled. It was the first time since her wedding that she had had a drink, during the day. The waitress brought the drink, and Ellen drank half of it immediately, eager to feel the relaxing warmth of alcohol. Every few seconds, she checked the door and looked at her watch. He's not going to come, she thought. It was almost 12:45. He's got cold feet. He's scared of Martin, and maybe he's scared of me. What will I do if he doesn't come? I guess I'll have some lunch and go back to work. He's got to come. He can't do this to me.
Hello?
The word startled Ellen. She hopped in her seat and said, "Oh."
Hooper slid into the seat opposite her and said, "I didn't mean to scare you, and I'm sorry I'm late. I had to stop for gas, and the station was jammed. The traffic was terrible, and so much for my excuses. I should have left more time. I am sorry." He looked into her eyes and he smiled.
She looked down at her glass. You don't have to apologize. I was late myself. The waitress came to the table. "Can I get you a drink?" she said to Hooper.
He noticed Ellen's glass and said, "Oh, sure. I guess so. If you are, I'll have a gin and tonic."
"I'll have another one."
The waitress left and Hooper said, "I don't normally drink at lunch."
"Neither do I."
After about 3 drinks, I say stupid things. I never did hold my liquor very well.
Ellen nodded. I know the feeling. I tend to get sort of,
Impetuous? So do I.
Really? I can't imagine you getting impetuous. I thought scientists weren't ever impetuous.
Hooper smiled and said histrionically, "It may seem, madam, that we are wed to our test tubes, but beneath the icy exteriors, there beats the hearts of some of the most brazen, raunchy people in the world."
Ellen laughed. The waitress brought the drinks and left 2 menus on the edge of the table. They talked, chatted really about old times, about the people they know, and what those people were doing now, about Hooper's ambitions in theology. They never mentioned the shark or Brody or Ellen's children. It was an easy, rambling conversation which suited Ellen. Her second drink loosened her up, and she felt happy and in command of herself. She wanted Hooper to have another drink, and she knew he was not likely to take the initiative and order one. She picked up one of the menus, hoping that the waitress would notice the movement, and said, "Let me see what looks good."
Hooper picked up the other menu and began to read. After a minute or two, the waitress strolled over to the table. "Are you ready to order?"
"Not quite yet," said Ellen. "It all looks good. Are you ready, Matthew?"
"Not quite."
"Why don't we have one more drink while we're looking?"
"Both?" said the waitress. Hooper seemed to ponder for a moment. Then he nodded his head and said, "Sure, it's a special occasion."
They sat in silence, reading the menus. Ellen tried to assess how she felt. 3 drinks would be a fairly heavy load for her to carry, and she wanted to make sure she didn't get fuzzy-headed or fuzzy-tongued. What was that saying about alcohol increasing the desire but taking away the performance? But that's just with men, she thought. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that. But what about him? Suppose he can't. Is there anything I can do? But that's silly. No, not on 2 drinks. It must take 5 or 6 or 7. A man has to be incapacitated, but not if he's scared. Does he look scared? She peeked over the top of the menu and looked at Hooper. He didn't look nervous. If anything, he looked slightly perplexed. "What's the matter?" she said.
"What do you mean?"
"Your eyebrows were all scrunched up. You looked confused."
"Oh, nothing. I was just looking at the scallops, or what they claim are scallops. The chances are they're flounder, cut up with a cookie cutter."
The waitress brought their drinks and said, "Ready?" "Yes," Ellen said. "I'll have the shrimp cocktail and the chicken." "What kind of dressing would you like on your salad?" "We have French, Roquefort, Thousand Island, and oil and vinegar." "Roquefort, please."
"Are these really bay scallops?"
"I guess so, if that's what it says."
"All right. I'll have the scallops. French dressing on the salad."
"Anything to start?"
"Nope. This'll be fine."
In a few minutes, the waitress brought Ellen's shrimp cocktail. When she had left, Ellen said, "Do you know what I'd love? Some wine."
"Well, that's a very interesting idea. But remember what I said about impetuousness. I may become irresponsible."
Not worried. She felt the blush crawl up in her cheeks.
Okay, but first I better check the treasury. He reached in his back pocket for his wallet.
Oh no, this is my treat.
Don't be silly.
No, really, I asked you to lunch. She began to panic. It had never occurred to her that he might insist on paying. She didn't want to annoy him by sticking him with a big bill. On the other hand, she didn't want to seem patronizing to offend his virility.
I know, but I'd like to take you to lunch.
Was this a gambit? She couldn't tell. If it was, she didn't want to refuse it, but if he was just being polite, "You're sweet," she said, but...
I'm serious, please.
She looked down and toyed with the one shrimp remaining on her plate. Well...
I know you're only being thoughtful, but don't be. Didn't David ever tell you about our grandfather?
Not that I remember. What about him?
Old Matt was known, and not very affectionately, as the Bandit. If he was alive today, I'd probably be at the head of the pack calling for his scalp, but he isn't. So all I have to worry about was whether to keep the bundle of money he left me or give it away. It really wasn't a very difficult moral dilemma. I figure I could spend it as well as anyone else I'd give it to.
Does David have a lot of money too?
Yes, that's one of the other things about him that's always baffled me. He's got enough to support himself and any number of wives for life. So why did he settle on a meatball for a second wife? Because she has more money than he does? I don't know. Maybe money doesn't feel comfortable unless it's married to money.
What did your grandfather do?
Railroads and mining, technically that is. Basically, he was a robber baron. At one point, he owned most of Denver. He was the landlord of the whole red light district.
That must have been profitable.
Not as much as you'd think. From what I hear, he'd like to collect his rent and trade.
That might be a gambit, Ellen thought. What should she say? That's supposed to be every schoolgirl's fantasy, she ventured playfully.
What is?
To be a prostitute. To sleep with a whole lot of different men.
Was it yours?
Ellen laughed, hoping to cover her blush. I don't remember if it was exactly that, she said, but I guess we all have fantasies of one kind or another.
Hooper smiled and leaned back in his chair. He called the waitress over and said, "Bring us a bottle of cold Chablis, would you please?"
Something's happening, Ellen thought. She wondered if he could smell, like an animal, the invitation she had extended. Whatever it was, he had taken the offensive. All she had to do was avoid discouraging him. The food came, followed a moment later by wine. Hooper's scallops were the size of marshmallows.
Flounder, I should have known.
How can you tell? Ellen asked immediately. She wished she hadn't said anything. She didn't want to let the conversation drift.
Well, they're too big for one thing, and the edges are too perfect. They were obviously cut.
I suppose you could send them back. She hoped he wouldn't. A quarrel with the waitress could spoil the mood.
I might, under different circumstances. He poured Ellen a glass of wine, then filled his own and raised it for a toast. "To fantasies," he said. "Tell me about yours."
His eyes were bright, liquid blue, and his lips were parted in a half smile. Ellen laughed. "Oh, mine aren't very interesting. I imagine they're just your old run-of-the-mill fantasies."
"Oh, there's no such thing. Tell me." He was asking, not demanding, but Ellen felt that the game she had started demanded that she answer.
"Oh, her stomach felt warm and the back of her neck was hot. Just the standard things. Rape, I guess, is one."
"How does it happen?"
She tried to think, and then she remembered the times when, alone, she would let her mind wander and conjure the carnal images. Usually she was in bed, often with her husband asleep beside her. Sometimes she found that, without knowing it, she had been rubbing her hand over her vagina, caressing herself. Different ways, she said.
Name one.
Sometimes I'm in the kitchen in the morning after everyone has left, and a workman from one of the houses next door comes to my back door. He wants to use the phone or have a glass of water.
And then?
I let him in the door, and he threatens to kill me if I don't do what he wants.
Does he hurt you?
Oh no, I mean, he doesn't stab me or anything.
Well, does he hit you?
No, he just rapes me.
Is it fun?
Not at first. It's scary, but then after a while, when he's
got you all ready?
Ellen's eyes moved to his, reading the remark. For humor, irony, or cruelty, she saw none. Hooper ran his tongue over her lips and leaned forward.
Over his lips.
Hooper ran his tongue over his lips and leaned forward until his face was only a foot or so away from hers. Ellen thought, the door's open now. All you have to do is walk through it. Yes.
Then it's fun.
Yes.
Do you ever have an orgasm?
Sometimes, not always.
Is he big?
Tall? Not.
They had been speaking very softly, and now Hooper lowered his voice to a whisper. I don't mean tall. Is he, big?
Usually huge.
Is he black?
No. I've heard that some women have fantasies about being raped by black men, but I never have.
All right, tell me another one.
Oh no. Now it's your turn.
They heard footsteps and turned to see the waitress approaching the table. Is everything all right? Fine, said Hooper curtly. Everything's fine. And the waitress left.
Do you think she heard?
Not a chance. Now tell me another one.
It's going to happen, Ellen thought, and she felt suddenly nervous. She wanted to tell him why she was behaving this way, to explain that she didn't do this all the time. He probably thinks I'm a whore. Forget it. Don't get sappy or you'll ruin it. No, she said with a smile. It's your turn.
Well, mine are usually orgies, or at least threesies.
What are threesies?
3 people, me and 2 girls.
Greedy. What do you do?
It varies. Everything imaginable.
Are you big?
Getting bigger every moment. What about you?
I don't know. Compared to what?
To other women? Some women have really tight ones.
You sound like a comparison shopper.
Just a conscientious consumer.
I don't know how I am. I haven't anything to compare it to. She looked down at her half-eaten chicken and laughed.
What's funny?
I was just wondering if, oh Lord, I'm getting a pain in my side. If chickens have...
Of course! But talk about a tidy.
They laughed together, and when the laughter faded, Ellen impulsively said, let's make a fantasy.
All right. How do you want to start?
What would you do to me if we were going to,
Well, that's a very interesting question. But before considering the what, however, we'd have to consider the where. I suppose there's always my room.
Too dangerous. Everybody knows me at the Abelard. Anywhere in Amity would be too dangerous.
Well, what about your house?
Lord, no. Suppose one of my children came home. Besides.
I know. No desecrating the conjugal sheets. Okay, where else?
There must be motels between here and Montauk, or even better, between here and Orient Point.
Fair enough. Even if there's not, there's always the car.
In broad daylight, you do have wild fantasies.
Well, after all, in fantasies, anything is possible.
All right, that's settled. So what would you do?
I think we should proceed chronologically. First of all, we would leave here in one car, probably mine, because it's least known. And we'd come back later to pick up yours.
Okay.
Then, while we were driving along, no, even before that, before we left here, I'd send you into the ladies' room, tell you to take off your panties.
Why?
Well, so I could explore you while we're on the road. You know, just to keep the motors running.
I see, she said, trying to seem matter of fact. She felt hot, flushed, and sensed that her mind was floating somewhere apart from her body. She was a third person listening to the conversation. She had to fight to keep from shifting on the leatherette bench. She wanted to squirm back and forth, to move her thighs up and down, but she was afraid of leaving stains on the seat.
Then, while we're driving along, you might be sitting on my right hand, and I'd be giving you a massage. Maybe I'd have my fly open. Maybe not, though, because you might get ideas which would undoubtedly cause me to lose control. And that would probably cause a massive accident that would leave us both dead.
Ellen started to giggle again, imagining the sight of Hooper lying by the side of the road, stiff as a flagpole, and herself lying next to him, her dress bunched up around her waist, and her vagina yawning open, glistening wet for the whole world to see.
We try to find a motel where the rooms are either in separate cabins or at least not butted right up against each other, wall to wall.
Why?
Noise. The wall's usually made of Kleenex and spit, and we don't want to be inhibited by the thought of a shoe salesman in the next room pressing his ear to the wall and getting his kicks listening to us.
Suppose you couldn't find a motel like that.
Oh, we would. As I said, in fantasy, anything is possible.
Why does he keep saying that? Ellen thought. He can't really be playing a word game, working up a fantasy he has no intention of fulfilling. Her mind scrambled for a question to keep the conversation alive. What name would you register us under?
Yes, I'd forgotten. These days, I can't conceive of anyone getting uptight about something like this. But you're right, we should have a name, just in case we ran into an old-fashioned innkeeper. How about Mr. and Mrs. Al Kinsey? We could say we were out on an extended field trip for research.
And we'd tell him we'd send him an autographed copy of our report.
We dedicate it to him.
They both laughed, and Ellen said, "What about after we registered?"
Well, we drive to wherever our room was, scout around to see if anyone seemed to be in the room nearby. Unless we had a cabin to ourselves, and then we just go inside.
And then?
Well, that's when our options broaden. I'd probably be so turned on that I'd grab you, let you have it, maybe on the bed, maybe not. That time could be my time. Your time would come later.
What do you mean?
Well, the first time would be out of control. Slam, bam, thank you, ma'am deal. After that, I'd have more control. And the second time, I could prepare you.
How could you do that?
With delicacy and finesse.
The waitress was approaching the table, so they sat back and stopped talking. Will there be anything else?
Nope. Check.
Ellen assumed that the waitress would return to the bar to total the bill, but she stood at the table, scribbling and carrying her ones. Ellen slid to the edge of the seat and said as she stood up, "Excuse me, I want to powder my nose before we go."
I know.
"You do," said the waitress as Ellen passed her. "Boy, that's what marriage will do to you. I hope nobody ever knows me that well." Ellen arrived home a little before 4:30. She went upstairs in the bathroom and turned on the water in the tub. She took off all her clothes. and stuffed them into the laundry hamper, mixing them with the clothes already in the hamper. She looked in the mirror and examined her face and neck. No marks. After her bath, she patted herself, brushed her teeth, and gargled with mouthwash. She went into the bedroom, put on a fresh pair of underpants and a nightgown, pulled back the bedclothes, and climbed into bed. She closed her eyes, hoping that sleep would pounce upon her. But sleep could not overpower a memory that kept sliding into her mind. It was a vision of Hooper, eyes wide and staring, but unseeing, at the wall as he approached climax. The eyes seemed to bulge until just before release. Ellen had feared they might actually pop out of their sockets. Hooper's teeth were clenched, and he ground them the way people do during sleep. From his voice there came a gurgling whine, whose tone rose higher and higher with each frenzied thrust. Even after his obvious violent climax, Hooper's countenance had not changed. His teeth were still clenched, his eyes still fixed on the wall, and he continued to pump madly. He was oblivious of the being beneath him, and when, perhaps a full minute after his climax, Hooper still did not relax, Ellen had become afraid. Of what, she wasn't sure. But the ferocity and the intensity of his assault seemed to her a pursuit in which she was only a vehicle. After a while, she had tapped him on the back and said, "Hey, I'm here too." And in a moment, his eyelids closed and his head dropped to her shoulder. Later, during their subsequent coupling, Hooper had been more gentle, more controlled, less detached, but the fury of their first encounter still lingered disturbingly in Ellen's mind. Finally, her mind gave into fatigue, and she fell asleep. Almost instantly, it seemed, she was awakened by a voice that said,
"Hey there, you okay?"
She opened her eyes and saw Brody sitting on the end of the bed. "What time is it?"
"It's almost 6.
Uh-oh, I have to go pick up Sean. Phyllis Santos must be having a fit.
I got him. I figured I'd better once I couldn't reach you.
You tried to reach me?
A couple of times. Tried you at the hospital at around 2, and they said that they thought you'd come home.
That's right, I did. I felt awful. My thyroid pills aren't doing what they should, so I came home.
Well, then I tried to reach you here.
It must have been important.
No, it was nothing important. If you must know, I was going to apologize for whatever I did that got you upset last night.
A twinge of shame struck Ellen, but it passed, and she said, "You're sweet, but don't worry. I'd already forgotten about it."
Oh. He waited a moment to see if she was going to say anything else, and when it was clear that she wasn't, he said, "Well, so where were you?"
"I told you, here." The words came out more harshly than she intended. "I came home and went to bed, and that's where you found me."
"And you didn't hear the phone? It's right here." Brody pointed to the bed table near the other side of the bed.
"No, she started to say she had turned the phone off, but then she remembered that this particular phone couldn't be turned off all the way. I took a pill. The moaning of the damned won't wake me after I've taken one of those pills."
"I really am going to throw those damn things down to John. You're turning into a junkie." He stood and went to the bathroom.
Ellen heard him flip up the toilet seat and begin to urinate. A loud, powerful, steady stream that went on and on and on. She smiled. Until today, she had assumed Brody was some kind of urinary freak. He could go for almost a whole day without urinating, and then when he did pee, he seemed to pee forever. Long ago, she had concluded that his bladder was the size of a watermelon. Now she knew that huge bladder capacity was simply a male trait. Now, she said to herself, I am a woman of the world.
"Have you heard from Hooper?"
Ellen thought for a moment about her response, then said, "He called this morning just to say thank you." "Why?"
"Well, I tried to get a hold of him today, too. Around midday and a couple of times during the afternoon. The hotel said they didn't know where he was." "What time was it when he called here?"
Just after you left for work.
Did he say what he was going to be doing?
He said he might try to work on the boat, I think. I really don't remember.
Oh, that's funny.
What is?
I stopped by the dock on my way home. The harbor master said he hadn't seen Hooper all day.
Maybe he changed his mind.
He was probably shagging Daisy Wicker in some hotel room.
Ellen heard the stream slow, then dwindle into droplets. Then she heard the toilet flush. Chapter. You know how I like that there's no chapter. There's no
titles for the chapters.
So I found the name of the title for this one, like in the first, because it opens with her staring out the window.
You had another one again? You already had the title for the last one, didn't you?
Yeah, guess who's coming to dinner?
Yeah, what's this one?
This one I wrote, Packing Rain and Regret.
Oh my God.
Because it's raining.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to do something with the bathroom because she's in and out of the bathroom 92,000 times.
So what I want to say about this chapter is, it seems that Ellen Brody, to greatly oversimplify the roles of men and women sexually, typically, and obviously this is not, always the case, but for the most part, it's really a situation where the woman is the prey and the man is the predator. I mean, that's just how the world is. Guys are always trying to have sex with women, and women got the goods and don't have to give it up unless, they want to. And, it's typically it's a cat and mouse game of, being funny, being charming, being a good catch, etc. But my point I was trying to get to here is that she clearly turned everything on its head and made Hooper the prey and she the predator. And the reason I say that is she was clearly trying to steer this launch date towards a sexual encounter. And, I think as a man, I'm quite familiar with that dynamic where you're trying to hint, suggest, cajole, persuade, your date to have sex. And again, it gets even more twisted, complicated, because she's a married woman and he knows who her husband is. I mean, so yeah. She really, flipped the script and like went after this much younger man. Again, she based on this, teeny tiny connection between the two of them. I mean, they didn't really know each other. They really didn't even know each other, despite the fact that Benchley gives us some reasons they would remember each other or things to talk about. But there was no real connection between Ellen. Do you remember what her maiden name was before she was Brody?
Oh, no.
I don't remember either. But there was no real connection.
I wasn't the one taking the notes this time.
Between her and him. So, it was the only real connection was her former class, i.e. Strata, and his current class, Strata. I think that on some level, Ellen Brody has got buyer's remorse about her 3 kids and her husband, and she wants to go back to when she was very wealthy, because her parents were wealthy, probably living in the Upper West Side of Manhattan, vacationing in the Hamptons or in Amity or Sag Harbor or Martha's Vineyard, whatever the case may be. But I thought about that situation because again, men are always trying to steer a date, a dinner, a lunch, whatever to, I guess what is normal and typical is you want to go back to my place. But when you're dealing with a married woman in a very small town, he couldn't go back to his place. Certainly couldn't go back to her place. So they had to do the whole, well, let's pretend. And we could get a hotel room, and then, she said, I'm sure there's plenty of hotels between here and Montauk. I think he said that, and then she said, or better, I think she said it, and she said, or better yet, between here and China Point. So she basically, instead of going towards Amity, she wanted to go away from Amity to get the hotel room.
That's telling right there.
Yeah.
Keep going further and further.
Yeah, because she's, again, this whole, let's pretend, I mean, Christ, that's a man's time-tested method of charming the pants off a girl, getting her in bed is the let's pretend. So
yeah, it was. I mean, how did you feel about me reading this part? Because I did most of the reading, and you were really the one that was going to be like really commenting on what was going on.
No, I thought you did a great job with the reading. I think that the only issue I had, and I tried to have a conversation with you beforehand, but you don't want to have it, was I wanted to understand the logistics. Who's going to read what? This is not a book that's written like
I'm going to read Ellen. That's all. Yeah, we're not getting an Oscar for this reading.
Oh, I am getting an Oscar.
But I did want to say that I think when you know that you want to, like she's like, I don't know when I decided to, get this whole plan together. I really didn't think, I thought the way that she came down on Brody after the dinner party was uncalled for. You were horrible. I think as a woman, she's just trying to have a valid reason for stepping out. I think that when you decide that you're going to step out on your partner, any little thing that they do is grounds for like, I'm going to have this affair. Because she's
justification.
She's trying to justify it in her mind. It was a dinner party. I really thought, like I said, when the porch light went off, I thought he was going to be in her face for the obvious flirting that she was doing at the end of the table, for putting on this expensive dinner, and for taking your pearls off your neck to put a shark's tooth around it. There were so many things that she did wrong that he didn't call her on. But I think he does understand his wife, where he's like, she still feels like this is how she counts her worth by, what the summer people think. And she said it here too. She wanted change, almost any change. She wanted to be assured and reassured that she was desirable, not just to her husband, for she had grown complacent about that, but to the people she saw as her real peers, the people among whom she still numbered herself. Okay. Well, we know that her husband desires her because it started out in the beginning of the book. He knew that when she was fishing for compliments, and he was happy to give them to her, and he wanted to have sex with her that night, but I don't know, she had a headache. And Matthew is not her peer.
No, I think you're misinterpreting that, in that when she talks about her peers, she means that my real peers are the summer people, because I'm wealthy from New York, and I went from being a summer person. I voluntarily traded away my summer person status to become an all year round person status, and I regret it.
Oh yeah, sure, because then she says she felt that without some remedy, that part of herself that she most cherished would die.
Again,
not being a wife,
she most
not
cherished,
being a mother,
she most
not
cherished,
being a candy striper,
yep,
not being part of this community in this town.
Well, again, I think that Benchley does a very good job of articulating the thoughts of Ellen Brody. Like that, this is how she thinks, and that's what led her to cheat on her husband.
Perhaps the past could never be revived, but perhaps it could be recalled physically and mentally. She wanted an injection, a transfusion.
She wanted the hot beef injections, what she wanted.
Matt Hooper was the only possible donor. He's a portal. He's a portal to her past, and she doesn't care. Could have been anybody that showed up on that, dock. As long as they were part of the summer people, she wants to feel the way she used to feel. But for what reason? Like, why can't she put this... I don't know. You make a decision, and not only make a decision, you got married, you involved somebody else's life, you've had children, their lives are now in your hands, the way that you're probably going to upset that. The guy that you're involved with told you how upsetting it was, to be 11 years old and his parents separated, and the weight that
the unearned
he had.
Guilt he carried.
So do the Brody children, were they also something to keep the marriage together?
I don't think we can. I don't think we can answer that question. It's a good question, but I don't think we can truly answer it. Enough to say that Benchley gave the reader psychological reasons why Ellen decided to cheat on Martin, and I think that's enough.
And I think that at the end, as he does, was he ended the last chapter with this young boy named Michael who got fired from his job, that's now going to start doing drugs. He's just, we just find out about him, but we don't really. And maybe he was brought in there because maybe Brody does get rid of her Valium, and maybe she now goes. There's a reason why we have to know that this kid's going to maybe deal drugs from he's the pharmacist's son.
Well, I think that, first of all, let's start with the fact that Ellen is lying about taking the pills.
Yeah.
So she wasn't out of it and didn't hear the phone right next to on the bedside. She was totally lying. She was in a hotel room with a man that she already knows her husband doesn't trust, doesn't like. Again, she picked a really, really bad person to cheat on with, because again...
Oh, God, the worst. And not only that, I was interested to know, did she go through with it? So all we know is that she comes home and she takes her clothes off, puts them in the hamper, she bathes, she powders, the whole thing all over again, and she's replaying in her mind, not this... Maybe he was reliving, maybe he was giving her the fantasy, but there's something that she's uneasy about because he was so detached when they were having sex.
Yeah, but
grinding the teeth.
Let me tell you something. Benchley described Ellen Brody's actions. Those are all the actions of someone who firmly intends on cheating on their husband. All the powdering, the toothbrush. She bought the toothbrush. She bought the.
I got all
that. That's.
I was interested to know. Because it ends with them getting the check, and he really didn't go into anything. Like,
no,
this
it's
is
not.
Where they
it's
went.
not.
We don't even know where they had sex. Did they have sex in a hotel? We don't know.
Probably.
Did they have sex in the car? I don't know.
It's not even necessary.
I
to know,
but I'm interested in the way that she came home and where her thoughts were. Did she feel like I made a mistake? I'm embarrassed. Her husband says that he's trying to call her because he wanted to apologize.
Well, not only that, Martin's antenna is way up. Because number one, he couldn't get a hold of his wife, and then number two, he couldn't get a hold of Brody same day.
Yeah.
So that's a big red flag.
Yeah, and I just was wondering why she was saying.
And let's not forget, again, as a man, and as a rational man who uses my mind and my own judgment, not only is somehow my wife, which is way out of character, unavailable at work. She went home, which is uncharacteristic, and she don't answer the phone at the house either. And the guy she was flirting with and Google over last night at my house, he's not around either. Yeah. I don't know.
So while she's getting herself ready to go, lay down on the bed, she said that he was oblivious of the being beneath him, and when perhaps a full minute after his climax, Hooper still did not relax. Ellen had become afraid. Of what? She wasn't sure, but the ferocity and intensity of his assault seemed to her a pursuit in which she was only a vehicle. So this is what Benchley does. You're one page from the ending, and he's bringing in another tension. This wasn't like, oh, okay, great. I got my injection that I was looking for, and
Yeah, but see that scene there?
Yeah.
I thought about this as we were reading it. What I immediately thought was, once again, here's Ellen Brody getting what she wanted and still having buyer's remorse. It's like this is this is what you wanted.
Yeah. Good point.
And the other thing I thought about too was that
she's an empty woman.
It seemed to surprise her. Like she seemed to be shocked that Brody was using her like a whore because there was no real emotional or psychological connection between the two of them. It was for all intents and purposes, it was sex with a stranger. Again, I understand she went out with the older brother, but that's she you know, this was a 9-year-old kid when she was 20 years old. And so, you know, it was sex with a stranger, a young stranger. And but you know, I don't think she was able to withstand the guilt and the psychology that comes along with being unfaithful.
Yeah. So that's it. That's our
Commentary.
Do we have any questions for our audience?
No.
Hope you enjoyed the chapter. And we will see you, as always, in the next one. You guys, you got, like I said...
coming up on 9.
We're coming up on 9. And I'm wondering how big of a chapter it is. Should we peek?
No, let's not peek. Shut this off.
He still thinks he could tell me what to do.
Well, then what'd you ask me for?
I didn't ask you.
Yeah.
I was asking
you.
You
said
it's small. It's small. Maybe if we have another heat wave tomorrow, if it doesn't break, we'll do chapter 10. You know, guys, I'm trying to get us ready for that movie on Discord. So... Oh, it's only 175 to 191.
16 pages.
Alrighty. See you later, guys. Hopefully it cools off so I can get in my art room and do some diamond painting. That I didn't do it all today. It was just too hot. Too hot.
I went swimming now.
He went swimming. Bye.